Let's see. Looks like we're one past the hour, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay. So, welcome once again. I'll go ahead and introduce our host for today. Hello, I'm Tim Villalobos, training specialist here at NGP Van. Joined with me is Sandro Cochito, head of deliverability at NGP Van, and Matthew Vernhout, head of services at Email Industries. We're going to be talking about a lot of things today. Email deliverability. We're going to be starting with some delivery basics. If anyone has any questions while we're going through this training, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. I will be monitoring that and bringing up questions as needed. Aside from that, I don't think there's anything else to say. Let's go ahead and get into it. I'm sure we're all busy, so let's just go ahead and get started. Right.
Yeah, I'll kick us off. Thanks for coming, everyone. I'm Sandro. So I guess before we get in, I think sometimes people have different definitions of what they mean by deliverability. So I just want to make sure we're working on the same kind of shared reference for what we mean by deliverability versus email delivery. And I think the main thing is that deliverability is just kind of whether your emails land in the inbox rather than in the spam folder, the promotions folder. It's about where your email lands rather than it just being successfully sent, which is why we kind of focus on successful inbox placement versus acceptance by someone like Gmail or Yahoo or whoever. And kind of along those lines, like email delivery is just whether it was accepted and successfully sent on our end. So that is kind of the shared definition that we had in mind for this webinar. Yeah, and just kind of a quick thing just to reassure you all if you've had deliverability issues. Getting email delivered is hard. There's a lot of different hops along the way. It's fairly old technology. It's being updated all the time, but it is sort of based on a physical mail model, and it's been modernized along the way, of course. But just to give you an idea of the hops, you send the email from targeted email, we add your DKIM signature, then the recipient's mail server receives it. They check your reputation, whether you or we are on any block lists. Then they validate that your DKIM signature and SPF record are correct. Um, then they decide what to do with various spam filters, content scoring, etc. And then your recipient sees it. So there is a lot that goes into it, but we hope to make it a little easier today. Yeah, and so how do you manage it? We can go to the next slide. There are really kind of three core components that go into deliverability and kind of your reputation. There are technical elements, strategic elements, and then the signals that your recipients and mailbox providers generate that you interpret and then do what you will with. So really the main technical requirement that you're responsible for is email authentication. So SPF, DKIM, DMARC. SPF just authorizes us to send email on your behalf through targeted email. DKIM is a digital signature that uh, confirms that the mail actually came from your domain. And then DMARC says, what do we want mailbox providers to do when mail fails SPF and DKIM? We handle kind of the bounce processing aspects for you, unsubscribe handling, and compliance with mailbox provider technical requirements. So those are very rarely issues. But the key thing that really impacts your domain reputation and your deliverability are those strategic elements. So setting proper expectations with your subscribers. Are they expecting to receive mail from you? Are they expecting to receive a certain number of messages? Do they kind of want the mail that you're sending? Um, and how does your kind of audience segmentation inform who you're sending to? And all of that generates signals, which is just feedback from your recipients and providers. So think things like spam complaints, that's a negative signal, or an open is a positive signal. And that should kind of inform your strategy for how to approach your mail program.
Great. Thanks again for the to the NGP team for inviting email industries to participate. There have been some questions already. I've been watching around what to watch for, what kind of signals to look for. So obviously deliverability can take place and impact you in many cases, in many different places, sorry, around getting your mail delivered. So if you see an increase in bounces, whether they're hard bounces or soft bounces in the application and how they're being recorded, just the idea there is a increase beyond your normal, 1 or 2% in bouncing. So those types of things will be an indicator that there could be a problem. Either it's, your list has gone soft and the addresses are just no longer valid, or you're actually having delivery or reputation issues. You may see complaints increase, you'll see decrease in your other performance metrics. Those types of things are going to be those leading indicators. Now, where you can look at your metrics across the platforms in by domain, you may see that everything looks really good and Gmail's 50% of your list and they're clicking and opening and happy. And then, Microsoft being 10% of your list is getting very little activity. So understanding the differences, each domain that you're sending mail to has its own reputation scale, and you need to manage them all independently. So other things that you'll look for is if you're getting replies from people or emails to your customer support saying, I'm no longer getting your emails. Those are things that you're going to want to watch out for when it comes to, am I having a delivery issue? Obviously, any type of block listing as well will be something that would be an indicator to say something has changed, possibly with your behavior, possibly with your list behavior, and really wanting to focus on how do we fix those things. But not all signals are created equal, right? There's a lot of things that are more tangible than they have been in the past, and a lot of things that are a little more directional and less. Uh, Sorry, I was just spacing on the word. Less effective than they used to be. We'll say that. So things to actually look at that are tangible: the number of bounces you're receiving, number of complaints you may be receiving, number of unsubscribes that you're seeing. If those metrics are changing, either in a positive or negative way, those are things that you want to definitely keep an eye on. Now, more directionally, you should also still pay attention to open rates, although open rates aren't as useful as they used to be, thanks to image caching and services like Apple MPP, Google Image Bot, etc. What they're doing is they're trying to increase the customer performance experience in regards to caching the images so they can serve them faster. But that also leads to potentially inflated open rates. So, if your open rate is very consistent and stable, that's great. That probably means you're not having a lot of delivery issues. If your open rate is very much fluctuating, you could be putting some mail in the spam folder and some mail in the inbox. But if your open rate really declines, that's where you're going to want to say, I'm probably not inboxing anymore. Those are the types of things to watch out for. Clicks as well, more on the B2B side. So if you do send a lot of mail B2B and you see a lot of clicks, it could be anti-spam solutions, clicking, looking for phishing messages and things like that. So just take that into consideration. You want to look a little farther downstream. Right? Are people donating? Are people downloading white papers? Are people visiting your blog? Are people visiting the different websites you're sending for and registering for events? That's really where you want to start focusing some of your KPIs on, because there's going to be less noise in that mix compared to the automated or non-human interactions, as we refer to them, for opens and clicks. As well as, obviously delivery tools, inbox testing, if you have access to those types of tools, just to make sure, are my messages delivering where I expect them to, sort of on a default setup for an account. Um, where do you start to worry, right? These are the types of things. I get this question all the time. At what point should I be concerned? So a healthy list, and if you look ever at your own Google Postmaster or in the Yahoo Sender Hub or in the Microsoft SNDS for those data points, a healthy list is going to have complaints under 3 per 1,000. Really, we want to be targeting 1 per 1,000 as a very healthy list, but 3 per 1,000 or less is sort of been that, since about 2024, the published best practice. You want to stay under 3 per 1,000. If you go above that consistently, expect to have delivery issues, right? That is the hard limit in Google. They say above 3 per 1,000, we may start junking your mail, putting it in the spam folder. Bounce rates, hard bounce specifically, you want to keep those low. You want to make sure your list is clean. So anything under about 2% consistently. Again, a lot of these metrics look at your trend. If your trend is pretty flat, you're probably very consistent. If your trend is all over, there are things you're going to want to look at. But overall, if you see a large number of soft bounces, even your total bounce rate exceeds 5%, there's probably other challenges you need to look at. Same with unsubscribes. Watch the trend. It's fluctuating. Even unsubscribes, I like to measure them in around the same way that you're seeing for spam complaints. If you're getting more than 3 unsubscribes per 1,000, you may not be meeting the expectations of your subscribers. So there are certainly things there to look at and trend. And in the case of unsubscribes, each list functions different. That's why you need to look at your own trend. I just kind of baseline when I'm working with customers at around 3 per 1,000. And then engagement, right? Over time, people stop engaging with your list. You need to have a plan for, is it a 6 month engagement window that I'm really going to focus on? And anyone after 6 months, it starts to decline. I need to treat them different. So build segments, look at those types of things when you're working. And really, if you see your active segment start to really drop in engagement, that's a clear sign that potentially you've missed something early and you're already at the point where we need to start looking at reputation recovery. So going back, right? What are we looking for? None of the signals independently are telling you that there's a problem. You need to look at all your signals holistically, right? As I was saying, open rates start to decline. Your messages are moving from the inbox to the spam folder. The reason we know that is because Apple doesn't cache images in the spam folder. Apple being such a large percentage of users on mobile device, if they're not caching your images, you're definitely not in the inbox. What else do we want to look at? A/B testing content, A/B testing subject lines. These are all things we want to look at to make sure your audience is really engaging and getting the messages that make the most sense to them. It could be a simple test between the same words, but one has an emoji and one doesn't have an emoji in the content. Those types of things are great ways to test your content and see what your consumers are really expecting. Then looking into, beyond just those engagement metrics, are you seeing behavior changes in any of the tools that we've talked about, right? Complaints, bounces, are the postmaster tools telling you things like your reputation's changing, your the 7 things that Google looks for when you log into the postmaster version 2, or you have green check boxes all the way down, right? We want to make sure that those types of things get sorted out as soon as possible so they don't impact your reputation long term. These are definitely the types of things that you want to keep an eye on. But again, it's not something you want to measure every minute. It's something you want to look at probably once a day or once a week at a minimum, just to make sure your metrics are staying where you want them to be. And when they're sliding or changing frequently, those are the types of things you want to reach out to either Sandra or you can reach out to us and we can help you look and say, what's going on, right? This is why we're here to help you understand the results and the metrics we're seeing today. So, like I said, the caution of open rates and click rates can look really impressive. But with the number of non-human interactions that we're seeing these days, bots are everywhere. You have to take that into consideration. And you have to potentially even look to say, is there a filter? And actually, Sandra, I'm going to ask you that. Is there a filter in your platform for filtering out non-human interaction opens?
Yes. So good question. By default, we exclude non-human opens and try for non-human clicks as well. like it can't be perfect just because of the nature of how opens are recorded. But we do have a secondary metric called machine opens, which you've probably seen if you sent through targeted email before, where we do kind of show the combined rate, which can be super useful for kind of testing like, okay, like are we going to the spam folder with certain providers? Like how is our mobile performance? Like Matt mentioned earlier. So yeah, we do our best to filter them out, but it's just not possible to filter
It's a
everything.
moving target as well, absolutely, in regards to what you see one day could change based on updates from other mailbox providers or people coming on board and starting to image cache as well. I think this is a trend that we're going to see across multiple mailbox providers as we continue to go, simply because it makes more sense to them to serve localized content through their own CDNs to their user base.
Yeah, and I think I saw Felicity just had a message like they switched from MailChimp to EA and noticed the open rate declined pretty dramatically. Like if that does apply to you, if you're switching right now and you notice that your open rate is lower, it is because most likely because we're filtering out those non-human interactions. So just something to be aware of.
And I would also add to that is your incumbent platform has history. So there is going to be a reputation assigned with your old incumbent. And as you move to the new one, you have to take the time to build that reputation. So I'm sure you've gone through a warming practice or something like that around onboarding, and it sends slow and grow over time. So those are the types of things that definitely when you're migrating to pay attention to as well. So okay, next slide, please.
Yeah, my turn. So I want to talk a little bit more specifically about things we see in political mail pretty often because I think this segment especially tends to be very operate on very short windows, obviously, because of the election cycle. It makes a lot of sense. But what we tend to see is maybe teams switch in between cycles. There's not a lot of continuity. People kind of go from 0 to 100 sometimes, which isn't the best for deliverability. So these things have been like very common in political mail. I think the Obama campaign pushed a lot of this like back in '08 because it was much easier to do. But because requirements have changed so much, this lands people in a lot of trouble. So kind of sending to every contact in your database, we see people using that all subscribers audience fairly often in targeted email. Sending to purchase or swapped lists is a huge issue. It violates our terms of service. So please do not buy or swap a list with another campaign. It also leads to pretty significant deliverability issues, kind of going back to that strategic component of deliverability that we talked about earlier, because recipients don't expect to receive mail from you, and so the ROI is not very good on purchasing a list and then sending to them. Um, we also kind of see again, kind of between cycles, a lot of times people reset their domain to reset reputation. Providers tend to start off very suspicious, and reputation is earned very slowly. So without kind of addressing the root cause. Like maybe you do it because you have a deliverability issue and you switch domains hoping it'll help, but uh, it kind of compounds the problem because warming up a new domain is a very kind of low and slow sort of process. And then another one is kind of lack of SPF, DKIM, DMARC. I think that's still because the hard requirement from like Gmail, Yahoo, Microsoft, and Apple is fairly new. And this is one of the first like big cycles where it is required. And so I am kind of seeing an uptick in people not having authentication set up. And if that applies to you, I'd encourage you to set it up today, if possible. We have a good help doc in our help center at help.ngpvan.com. But yeah, these are things that we kind of commonly see, especially in the political mail space, that I'd recommend avoiding. And yeah, this is another piece, because sometimes people will bring up kind of can spam, and kind of that law, because it technically does not apply to political mail, but a lot of political mail is blocked every single day, as I'm sure a lot of you know on the call. It just happens. Um, Back in 2022, the RNC sued Google, kind of alleging that its filters were biased. I believe in one of the examples, they also didn't have like a DKIM record or something. It was they were kind of breaking all of the rules and were mad at Google. But I will say that especially since this moment, it kind of encouraged Google to standardize its rules uh for deliverability, and like they're much better now about letting people know how to make it to the inbox. A couple of years ago, or maybe 3 years ago now, some of you may remember they started requiring authentication for your mail, one click unsubscribe. That was kind of a direct result of this RNC lawsuit. And so now I think the end result is that political mail also has to follow the exact same rules that like large marketers do, which I think can catch people off guard sometimes because they view those mail streams as like very different in their head, especially if you're working on a campaign or with a campaign. But I think the bottom line is that as a result of all of this, the rules are kind of following these like bulk marketing program paradigms, and like you need to adjust to it if you haven't. I don't know. Is there anything you'd add there, Matt?
No, I think the important thing is consumers don't differentiate between commercial mail and political mail. They look at it
Yeah.
as, did I ask for this or not? And I think that's an important thing to remember is the consumer is the customer of the mailbox provider, right? You as a sender are a guest trying to get through the door. If you behave well, they'll let you through the door. If you don't behave well, they'll put you in the junk folder and maybe eventually just stop accepting your mail altogether. So they're going to focus on what makes their consumers happy. And I think that's what, when we look at this case with the RNC and Google, Google basically said our consumers told us this was spam, so our filters adjusted and treated it as such. Um, so that's something really important, I think, to understand is a lot of these filters are driven nowadays by machine learning and behavioral analysis. They're not looking at is this political, is it commercial, is it B2B mail? It's really treating everyone exactly the same to say, are you behaving and following our guidelines and rules?
Yeah, no, that thank you for adding that. I think the kind of recipient expectation is the most important thing. Like, are they expecting to receive your mail? Do they want the mail? Things like that are very important. And this is all kind of a side effect of that in a way. I think we can jump to the next. Thank you. Yeah, so I guess just to hammer that point home a little bit, like I just wanted to show kind of a good sender versus maybe a less good sender that has some room to improve. Maybe they're not struggling everywhere at once, but they're seeing kind of they're looking at the signals that Matt talked about earlier, and they're noticing declines from their baseline. So I would say like a good sender kind of grows their list organically. They send periodic fundraising emails and weekly newsletters, and kind of vary the content. One thing that I see fairly often that can lead to deliverability issues is over sending fundraising content, because it's such a high intent kind of ask for people. It can be like mathematically difficult to sustain the level of engagement you need to kind of maintain a solid domain reputation, and it can lead to a little bit of list fatigue. So I think including things like newsletters, surveys, like whatever your specific list likes, can often make the fundraising appeals perform well or perform better than they would if you kind of just send over and over. Yeah, and kind of along those lines, a good sender also kind of invites feedback, incorporates responses from their recipients into emails. That's a big one. And another big thing is kind of consistency, going back to that recipient expectation piece. They send from the same domain, same platform, same branding every time. That's not to say you can never change things up. Like if you're doing an A/B test, or maybe you have a new campaign logo, that's obviously fine. But I think keeping recipient expectation in mind when you make those changes is important. Um, and yeah, and along those lines, a less good sender kind of they buy rent, swap lists, and then just send nothing but fundraising emails up to election day and then nothing else, which I think is pretty common. Like I'm not saying I blame anyone for doing that, just because this is such a cyclical segment of email because of the campaign cycle. But I think it's important to have kind of like communication throughout the year, and like beyond fundraising, to really engage with people between cycles as well.
Sandro, while you're on the subject of list trades and such, I've had a number of questions asking why that might be the case, so that they can explain it to other folks who are interested in something like that, and just like explaining a little bit more on
On like
why it's
why it's
detrimental
against
to
her,
your
why it's
yeah
detrimental.
yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure Matt will be able to add stuff to this too. But like the there are two reasons, like that it's recipient expectation is a huge one. Like those you would be sending to people who did not opt into that mail, which is significantly more likely to generate negative signals. So I would say like your domain reputation in a lot of ways is defined by the positive and negative signals that you generate with a particular mailbox provider. So positive signals, something like an open, time spent reading, things along those lines, a click. Negative signals, an unsubscribe, a spam complaint, moving an email like straight into the archive folder. When you send to people who like don't expect to receive that mail and haven't opted in, they are infinitely more likely to interact negatively with your program, which will hurt your ability to get into the inbox, which will then hurt fundraising performance, the ability to kind of get your message out. Like it's a very low ROI proposition in my experience. It's just not a good idea because of that recipient expectation piece. And the other thing is it violates our terms of service. Like we don't allow it. So I would say just don't do it for that reason. But even beyond that, it's not very effective, typically in the medium to long term. Like you may see sometimes we see like people open more on the first email because they're like, what is this? Like I don't know what this is. But then the subsequent interactions are pretty much always negative.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is it goes back to like the consumer expectation, right? Consumers are more than happy to report spam on stuff they're not expecting. So if you buy a list, if you get a third party list, and you send mail to it, um, consumers are going to react. Mailbox providers will follow their lead, There was a study done by MailChimp a number of years ago. I don't know if I can find it while we're on the call, but if I can find it, I will share it. It actually showed performance differences between uh, opt-in list and purchase list, and the difference is significant in regards to how people engage or respond to uh, purchased data or third-party data being sent.
Yeah, no, and it's a good question too for the people who are asking because I think it is like there is so much immediate fundraising pressure sometimes that people don't always like there are trade-offs that I think people are weighing differently, but like it's typically like quite ineffective. So it's a good question for sure. Yeah, and I guess moving on to this slide, like how how do you prevent deliverability issues? I think this is a lot of stuff we've covered. Like it kind of starts with your data, your opt-ins, how people have opted in the first place, whether the addresses you're sending to are validated and can receive mail, kind of how your list hygiene is. I think another piece is setting a sunset policy and creating re-engagement opportunities before sunsetting. This is a number I'm making up. 90 days is pretty short, but let's say your sunset policy is 90 days, and then after that, you kind of retire someone from the list. What you can do is kind of lean on automation to do continuous re-engagement before they hit that 90 days. If you win them back, that's great. They can be back on the list again. But if if you don't, like maybe you uh, retire them and stop emailing them. I see someone asking what I mean by sunset. I just mean like at which point after they stop engaging, do you stop emailing them and stop trying to re-engage? Our automation tool is a great way to sort of incorporate re-engagement like that. And yeah, kind of expanding your audience slowly and strategically instead of chasing more volume just because. And then, like we've talked about, following proper permission practices. We require an unsubscribe link, so uh, you should be set there if you send from targeted email, and we unsubscribe immediately. But the reason I have that no longer than 10 days in there is because I know some people use maybe third party integrations, like maybe you use Salesforce as your database of record. Just making sure that that sync is quick if you have kind of a unique setup. Um, but yeah, I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah, and then just to round out the political specific stuff, I just wanted to give a quick note on warming and campaign launches because I think the ideal workflow from the campaign perspective is obviously big splash at launch, like you're in the news cycle, you want to send to everyone you can, announce to as many recipients as possible, and you have like a brand new domain, new branding, because it's an exciting new launch. And there's kind of urgent fundraising pressure and immediate ROI expectations. But like we talked about, there are some deliverability constraints. Like a brand new domain has no reputation, and mailbox providers can be very suspicious to start off. And it can kind of put you in a difficult spot if you start off as big as possible and then try to reel back. I know a lot of people have uh, run into issues, or and I know a lot of people are working on kind of like how do we do this. I guess one suggestion I would have is to kind of lean into your network and your candidates network. Like, is there maybe someone who's given an endorsement who has a warmer list who can kind of send and then you do fundraising that way immediately? are there other channels you can lean into, like text or ads, things along those lines? I think it's good to think of email as just one communication channel in your campaign strategy, and then like kind of working within those mailbox provider constraints because they can be a little tough with a campaign launch.
Awesome. So that brings us to sort of the next section that we wanted to talk about. And really, that's our latest integration between the email industry's address validation tool, known as Alfred, and the NGB van platform. So over the last several months, we've been building an integration and getting it up and running in regards to ensuring that you can take your lists that you've acquired over the years and run them through a validation service that gives back a number of different scores. And we're going to talk about those scores in a few slides, but generally it's going to give you these addresses are safe, these addresses are highly risky to send to, and in between there's a gradient of risk score. So in the tool, you'll see a 10, 10 being this address is valid and safe to send to, and 1 being this address is generally not safe to send to. So that's sort of the scale. The lower the number, the more risk there is to send to that address. That's also paired with a service that we developed a long time ago called Black Box. Black Box is a threat score. So it looks at some of the things around beyond just is the email valid, it's is this address actually safe to send to? So there could be a number of reasons that it's unsafe. It could be something we've identified as a domain that works with various blocklisting services. It could be an individual that has been involved in litigation in the past regarding email. There are a whole wide range of things that we would deem an email to be a threat to a program. Beyond just is it valid? So you can have very valid emails that potentially have threats associated with them in regards to should you send email to those people. So we're going to talk about that a bit more and sort of how the integration works, I believe, in just a couple slides. So we can jump to the next slide, and we're going to talk about use cases here about within the platform. Sandra.
Yeah, so just this is really briefly on how to set it up. So it's in the API integration section. So like if you're on the homepage of NGP Van or Every Action, just search for API integrations. Then you go through the regular process to request a new API key. If you're not familiar, you just click that request an API key button, select Alfred from the integrations list, and then send the request to your committee administrator who can then approve it for you. And let's go to the next slide. Yeah, and this is just a quick note because it has personally tripped me up before, but once you have your key in kind of the Alfred platform, just skipping ahead a little bit, in order for it to show up, you need to share folder access with the API user. This is typical for a lot of our integrations, but you would just want to make a folder for the integration and then give the Alfred by Email Industries API user access to that folder. So I think we could go to the next slide.
So once you've done the work in the platform and you have your API key set up, you can then log into Alfred. So you'd have to create an account with Alfred. And then you put your API key in here as you select upload. So it's basically going to say, how do you want us to connect? Once you've filled in your name and the API key, and you go to the next slide, one too far. There we go. You'll get a list of all of the different segments or lists within the application that you've given access to. So in our uh, example here, there's just one group that you can access. So you select the group, and then you would say import list. From there, on the next slide, you will get an option that shows you this. So it'll upload the list, it'll tell you how many addresses were uploaded, and then you can do one of two things. You can do a evaluation. So the evaluation will basically do a quick scan and give you back a should you clean this list or not type of opinion. It'll tell you potential number of bounces from the quick scan, potential number of threats that would be identified. Once you've done that, you can then click hygiene list. And in there, there's three options. Usually I would say take the combined option. So you'll take that, and when you run that, Alfred will then analyze your list. And when it's done, it will return back the result. That result will then say things like how many addresses it has been deemed to be safe to send, how many addresses are sort of caution or beware when you're sending to these. And then in the third category, it will say things like you should avoid sending to these. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see some of the scoring that comes back. So we have 10 classifications, like I said. The bottom three are the most dangerous, according to us, to send to, for threat or invalid reasons. There's a group in the middle. Due to the type of address they are, some of them are harder to classify than others. So you may see that some of them are disposable domains, catch-all domains, role-based address. So I saw someone earlier asking about like info at. That would be considered a role-based address when you're trying to send to it. Sending from info at is perfectly acceptable, but sending to things like info, abuse, support, help, those types of addresses that are generally tied to either a distribution list or not to a single individual would fall into this medium risk schedule. Because if it goes to like 5 people, it only takes one of those people to report you as spam. But if all 5 report you as spam, that's actually 5 complaints versus just one for the same email. So there is a threat score that gets associated there. And then as confidence grows, we go up between 7, 8, 9, and 10 being the most confident of those addresses when it comes to scoring and threats. So typically we would say 6 and above, generally safe to send to. 4 and 5, those are certainly a cautious group to send to in regards to you may want to look at past behavior, you may want to look at how you acquired the name, you may want to look at how long ago you acquired the name. But then anything 1, 2, and 3, we would recommend you suppress and not send to at all. Next slide. So key takeaways, right? So deliverability is really about what happens in the inbox. It's not merely did it get accepted by the mail server on the receiving end. You need to make sure you're reading your signals and you're reporting properly to understand trends. I'm a huge believer that a single outlier is not a trend. So look at your trend over either a 15 or 30-day window to make sure that it's trending or holding stable. Segmentation is a huge thing. I love segmentation when it comes to this is my super active users, these are my moderately active users, these are my virtually inactive users. Targeting those with different cadences, different types of messaging, even to make sure those groups that are on the far end of not really engaged, maybe they need a survey, maybe they need questions, maybe you need to ask if they're still interested in hearing from you. Hygiene is no longer an option. Really, you need to have clean lists. All the things that Sandra mentioned earlier around, too many bounces, too many messages not being read, things being ignored by consumers. Those are all problems that need to be solved, and understanding hygiene and how you're collecting that data, how you're managing it long term. Even the idea of the last time this person did something was 2 years ago, right? If they're not doing anything anymore, you should probably stop sending to them. And then probably for a lot of political mail, the important thing to remember is spam filters, they don't care which way the candidate leans. If the candidate gets a lot of complaints and a lot of inactive users and a lot of problematic signals, they're going to put it in the junk folder. It's not personal. It's all about user behavior. So with that, I mean, there's a whole bunch of questions. I think we have about 15 minutes. Hopefully we can crack through a whole bunch of them. But if after this you have additional questions, you can reach out to the NGP team, and you can reach out direct to the email industries team.
All right, if we're taking questions, I have a big one that we've seen a number of times, which is about sending to your whole database or your entire audience as opposed to segmenting, and really why that is the case. Why should we not be doing that, and should we be segmenting, right? I know we've briefly touched on that, but if we can get into that a little bit more for those question askers.
Yeah. I mean, I think the big part is if you're not segmenting, you're treating first off everyone the same. So you're treating every user the same when they may have different needs or wants. So looking at segmentation is a huge part of that, in regards to talking to consumers or talking to recipients the way that they want to hear from you. So there's going to be some things there from a segmentation point of view, that makes sense. Now, if you do have a very small list, segmentation may be very hard because you may not have enough data points. But you can always segment on something. You can segment on, if you have multiple websites and you want to see how the different websites are performing, you can segment based on opt-in collection data point to say, maybe there's a difference in the forms and how they're collecting the quality of data that they're received. You can segment on recency and frequency of communication in regards to are they engaged or not engaged. You can segment in theory based on recipient domain if you wanted to say treat Gmail users this way and Microsoft users that way. Um, there's always things you can segment on, donors, non-donors, new donors versus old donors who haven't donated in a while. There's lots of different segmentation. Basically, the sky's the limit, and your imagination is the only thing holding you back when it comes to segmentation.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, what was I going to say? I promise I had something to say. Oh man.
That's good. I forgot
Um,
earlier too, so we're good.
we
Even
Yeah,
circled
we
back
both had
around.
one. Yeah,
you'll think about it in 30 seconds and we'll come back to it.
of
Okay.
course. That's always
Okay.
how it goes.
Another question has been if you are getting vastly different open rates for different email providers, like say 40% with Gmail, but Microsoft is at 45, is there any recommendations for boosting those others who are you're not really getting through to?
Yeah, I think that is a huge point where you revisit your segmentation to those specific providers. So like if you look good at Gmail, if you're looking at kind of like the email domain deliverability report, which is kind of a mouthful for a report, but just wanted to mention it in case people weren't aware of it. But maybe Microsoft is having issues. You would want to like take a deep dive and see like what your metrics are to Microsoft to see maybe what caused the slide. Like, are you seeing significantly more unsubscribes to Microsoft recipients? Like, you just need to follow the thread compared to your baseline. And kind of go from there. It can be a little different depending on what the root cause of the issue is. But that's kind of my general advice is to follow those trends per provider because they are very revealing a lot of the time. And I remembered what I was going to say. I think the other reason for segmentation is kind of those positive and negative signals that I mentioned. People who are not opening are kind of like by definition giving you a negative signal. They're ignoring your mail, which is training Gmail or Yahoo or whoever to say, okay, like I'm a sender who maybe I should go to the spam folder if I kind of like keep at this level. So it's important to segment for that reason because the more engaged people will give you positive signals. And it's the same kind of principle if you're having an issue with a specific provider as well.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would say there is you may want to treat different mailbox provider different. Like Gmail, it might be more than acceptable to send to somebody who's been, you know, active within the last 12 months, whereas Microsoft, you may need to say active in the last 6 months. So you may need to do some of that tailoring when it comes to different segments for different mailbox providers. Uh, and the biggest thing I can say here is every list performs slightly different. So some of these suggestions are start here and then move the goalposts till they're acceptable for your needs and your business.
All right, another question. If I send my email address, or if my send email address is saved as a contact in a recipient's phone, does that increase the chance that my emails are going to land in the primary inbox?
Um, Maybe. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to land in the primary inbox, but it does mean it's got a much higher chance of landing in the inbox. So, the way most mailbox providers work, if you're in the address book, it's considered basically a personal allow list, meaning I've liked receiving mail from this person in the past. So, it does mean that they will put the mail typically back in the inbox for future, but it's not a guarantee. Like, if you have a bunch of people in your inbox and then you go off and you do a bunch of bad things to the rest of the audience at that mailbox provider, and it does impact your reputation enough, it could not be that instant inbox pass anymore. So, I mean, you're on an invite list, but if you behave bad enough, it doesn't matter if you're on the invite list or not.
Yeah, and it depends a little bit on which contact list you mean. Like if it's just like a contact on like your phone, for example, that may help with like the mail app, I think sometimes. But it wouldn't necessarily impact like Gmail's filtering. They may not care. So like it depends like, okay, are you a contact in the Gmail address book versus is your like number saved on someone's phone as well? Which is just like a small nuance.
That's a great point. Yeah, it depends which address book you're in. Absolutely.
All right. Another question. Is there a functional difference when it comes to email subscription status between confirmation unknown and confirmation not needed?
Um, no. So it really goes back to our confirmed opt-in functionality. If you have that enabled, it does matter because then you're only sending to confirmation not needed and confirmation status of confirmed. If you don't have confirmed opt-in enabled, it there's no functional difference.
All right. Another question. Are we able to see time spent reading metrics in every action or van or NGP?
I wish, but there's no way to measure it. That's I think kind of a privacy stance that a lot of providers have taken. It would be very nice. Like I think the big thing is just to like write your emails in such a way that maybe encourages people to spend a little bit extra time, especially for a newsletter. That's also why segmentation is important, but we cannot see exactly how long someone has spent reading.
All right, understood. Another question. Does machine opens distinguish between image caching and real opens?
This is a tough one, because the answer is unfortunately it depends. So if I'm reading on my iPhone and my Mac Mail app, for example, Apple will cache the images and serve me the cached images, so you'll only see the machine open. But if I read it on my iPhone and then I read it on my Windows desktop, you will get the iPhone MPP open and you'll get the Mac open, or sorry, the PC open, because the two caching services don't talk to each other. So you may, in some cases, see a secondary open, which would be the a secondary device. But once Apple's cached it, they're going to serve those cached images to the individuals over and over again. So you won't ever see the secondary open. That also is one of the reasons it's hard to do read time, as the previous question, because if that image is cached, we don't know. It's just been cached and it serves as it gets cached.
Another question. We have a huge list where people occasionally fall off from not clicking during the off season. Are there good resources to re-engage after those cycles?
I
I
mean,
think it really, sorry, you go ahead.
no, please go ahead.
I think it really depends on your list and your overall cadence. Like that's why I'd recommend kind of a sunset policy that's based on like your own engagement data, like so you can see when it's unlikely for someone to re-engage and then you kind of tailor it based on that. That way, like once someone's sunset, you're not trying to re-engage in large batches and then generate a bunch of negative signals for that reason. But yeah, it really depends on your specific list, I think. I think keeping sending things like when the cycle stops or like off year is really important. But yeah, I don't know if I can get like much more specific than that necessarily.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would add is find some off season, if you will, content to send to people, even if you're not sending as frequently, just some type of update to keep them engaged and sort of in the know about your list so that they don't go for a period of, say, 6 months and not hear from you because people won't remember. I mean, I don't remember what I did on the internet 2 weeks ago, let alone what I did 6 months ago. So that's just one thing to kind of pay attention to is the longer the gap, the worse the memory of the person's going to be to say, did I actually subscribe to this? Have I actually engaged with it in the past? Do I still want it? So,
Sounds good. I think we have time for maybe one or two questions. I do want to go ahead and say, though, just because I saw someone mention this, looking for the questions that are being asked multiple times in the Q&A. So I do apologize if we've not been able to get to your question specifically. But I would encourage everyone, if your question was not answered, we do have these emails on the screen. So reach out. You can reach out to us at deliverability@ngpvan.com if you do have those pressing questions that we're not able to get to. So just want to be mindful of everyone's time and all those questions that are being asked repeatedly in the chat. Another question that I've seen multiple times, are we able to do full exports of all of our deliverability data or certain aspects of it, and how would we do that?
Yeah, I would say start with the built-in reports that we have. And if you have any like specific questions beyond that, I would say reach out to support at ngpvan.com. The two I would recommend right off the bat are the email domain level deliverability report, the email performance report, and the email comparison report. I guess that's three and not two. But I think those three will get you what you need. But if there's like a specific data point you're after, like I would reach out to support at that point. And you can find any of those reports. If you're on the main menu, you can either go to Report Manager or just search for the name of the report in the sidebar.
All right, all right. Coming to a close here. We're at 1:59. Just want to go ahead and say thank you, everybody, so much for joining. I appreciate everyone's patience on the questions here. Once again, thank you so much to our presenters. Again, would encourage everyone who still has remaining questions to go ahead and reach out to Deliverability at GPVan. You can also reach out to Email Industries as well at the emails that we see on screen here if you have questions that are targeted towards Email Industries. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining. Any last things for our presenters?
Just thank you everyone for coming. There were a lot of good questions.
All right.
yeah, thank you to the NGP Van team for inviting us along. And it's been great chatting with you all. And the questions were fantastic. So if we didn't get to them, we'll see if we can get some of these offline questions for you guys answered after the session.
All right. All right. Thanks, everybody. And if you see a feedback survey pop up whenever you close out of here, would very, very much appreciate it if you could fill that out. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thanks so much. Have a good one.